Okay, Sam is about to describe April 17th, 1943, which is the day that he remembers that was the final liquidation of the town of Ishvitze, which is the town all of our family were living in, and he'll describe that.
So this is the morning of the liquidation of the ghetto. I was woken up very, very early in the morning by firing that I heard all the way around the house that we lived in. I quickly dressed and I rose, my sister and my mother. We all quickly dressed and my mother urged us on to very quickly get out. There was no one else in this room anymore, where it was previously occupied by perhaps a dozen people. My father was not around, and the three of us ran. There was on the second floor that this apartment was on, and we ran downstairs, didn't see any more Jewish people in that building, and we ran outside, didn't see anybody. We were kind of spooked, so to say, where does one go? And the firing we heard was coming from the cemetery. One Gentile lady told us from her house that all Jews are being rounded up and either being put on into railroad cars or being led up the cemetery and being machine gunned. Not knowing where to move, where to go, my mother directed us in front of flower bed at a Gentile home, which was right at the edge of the outside of the ghetto. It happened not to be surrounded by any kind of fence. We stayed in that position, crouched, for perhaps a half hour, when the lady of the house came out and said, we cannot stay here anymore because she feared that when we are shot, blood will be sprayed on the walls of that house, and she does not want to be cleaning that, and we must leave immediately. And so we left, went back into the house where we lived, and on the ground floor, happened to go through the kitchen of one of the rooms there, and we noticed that one of the boards in the kitchen was a little bit higher than all the other boards. And my mother said in Jewish that probably this is a hiding place. She lifted up this board, and sure enough, there were a number of other people hiding in there. Exactly, there were 8.
Did you know any of them?
Yes. There was Chaim Chu's 2 sisters. Chaim Chu's, you know who Chaim Chu is. Chaim Chu's nephew, he was about 14, 15. Chaim Chu's niece, maybe about the age of my sister. And 4 other Jewish people that I don't remember their name. But I noticed that they were from the same building where we lived in our duration in the ghetto. And we slid into that hall. The hall was probably I'd say half the size of a car, a normal car. A car was 6 feet, I'd say 3 by 2 or 3 by 3, something like that. And all 12 of us at this point, 11 of us at this point, squeezed in there. We put the board back on top, and we quietly sat there. We heard noises, German voices, Polish voices, because the Polish police always participated in liquidating Jews at all times. And they were looking into the rooms to see if there's any more Jews left. Fortunately, they didn't come into the kitchen, but we just heard the steps in the hallway. And so we sat there, and it was getting very hot. I guess the day was progressing, and this was was turning out to be a warm afternoon. And at a given point, as always, the Gentile people used to come to the Jewish section and rob things. In other words, they used to take whatever was left over that was not taken by the German soldiers or the police affiliated with the German soldiers. And two Gentile ladies came down and spoke in Polish. Of course, I understand Polish. I understood it then, I understand it now. And they was just taking things, and one said to the other, I will not say it in Polish because nobody understands Polish anyway, so I'll do.
Say it and then translate.
Okay. In Polish they said, zobacz tam, wychodzi bardzo gorące powietrze, pewno Żydzi tam są. Look over there, hot air is coming out, probably Jews are hiding there. And they came over, lifted up the board, and they started selling, Jews are here, Jews are here. And they ran over to the window and started calling the other Gentile, when I say Gentile, I'm referring to Poles, Christian Poles, and shouting, discovered a Jewish hiding place. And all of us started getting out all at once. While I'm getting out, somebody pulled my shoes off. And so I got out anyway, without my shoes, and my mother grabbed my sister by the hand, and pulled away from the other 8 people, and started walking away from that, because suddenly we saw a surge of Polish people running into that room and grabbing the Jewish people and grabbing them outside. At the same time, they were still firing at the cemetery. They were finishing killing the rest of the Jews that they had gotten out of the ghetto. And so we heard the firing. And I and my mother and my sister were walking up there. Suddenly I realized I have no shoes, so I took my socks off and I was walking barefoot, which looked better than just in socks. And we're walking away from the place where this had happened and towards the exit of the ghetto, which you could sneak through from the top of a hill, because a lot of Gentile people lived on that top of the hill, and there was no longer any kind of police standing there. And as we were going along, some of the people were shouting Jewish epithets, but my mother knew the Christian prayer, like you say, imię Ojca i Syna i Ducha Świętego, Amen, like that. I don't know how you say that in English, really. I think it says, probably the translation would be, bless the Lord in the name of Jesus Christ. And when they heard that, they stopped saying things. And they said, are you not Jewish? And my mother said, no. So they just said nothing, and we walked away. We walked maybe another quarter of a mile, and away from, we're trying to get to the woods. And we come to the top from the ghetto, and there was a lot of green fields that one could hide in. And we get into that field, and my mother suddenly notices, what we're going to do for shoes for you, but anyway, it wasn't solved at this point, and so that there's nothing we can do about that. And my mother said that we'll sit here for the rest of the day. When night comes, we will go to the village of Wierkowice, which was about 5, maybe 6 kilometers from the ghetto. And we're sitting there maybe a half hour, as I told you before, under those circumstances, time becomes like forever. I mean, minutes go so slow, and you just don't know what to do with yourself. And suddenly, in front of us appears a tall man. and he says in Polish that you are Jews and I'm going to take you back to be killed. The Germans are offering 5 zlotys for every Jew I bring in that they kill. And you must come with me. He pulls a gun out, identifies himself as a Volksdeutsch. Volksdeutsch as a Pole that has committed himself to German cooperation. And he starts walking us back to where we came from. And my mother starts pleading with him, why would you want to kill those 2 small children? What will you get out of this? Well, I'm making the money. And so she says, well, what if I give you whatever money I have and let us go? He stopped. He says, yeah, okay, I'll take the money, I'll let you go. So my mother takes out, she had some dollar bills. I don't know where she'd got it from. She gives it to him, but he says, nope, take the money, I'm taking you anyway. So that was the attempt that she had made to save us, but it didn't work, and he's taken us down. Now we're going back the same route we went up. And we reached the point where the 2 ladies discovered us in the house. And in front of me, I see the 7 people are totally dead already. They were killed by the Polish people with farm utensils, such as what do you dig with? Hoes and rakes and shuffles, and those the men leaning over, and the woman was standing there leaning over, and 2 of the kids are dead, leaning over them, and they tell him, let's have those 3 Jews to him. And he says, no, you can't have these 3 Jews because I'm getting 5 zloty a head by the cemetery for them. You're not getting those. And he tells us, keep going. And we keep going, we bypass them. This is within spaces of 50 yards, 70 yards, We're not walking very fast, it's slow walking. And we're walking towards the buildings that had the hole. I told you before, where your father had the confectionery store, they had holes in them. And my mother tells us in Jewish that, children, this is it. When I tell you, I want you to run into these buildings. If he shoots, he shoots. If not, we meet across the other side, on the Christian side of this town, and whatever happens, happens. We have no choice. When I tell you in Jewish to run, you must run. And we walk a little bit as we approach those buildings. My mother says in Jewish to run, and we run. And she ran as well. The guy fired a couple of times and missed us. And we ran across to the other side of the ghetto. And this guy doesn't run after us anymore. For whatever reason, that was it. Maybe he didn't want to, maybe he just didn't want to run, or just gave up, or whatever. And suddenly we're on the Christian side of the ghetto. And we walk maybe a block inside the Christian side. And my mother looks at me and she says, my God, I didn't see you have your pants outside in. My pockets are out and all that. You're a mess, and we're never going to get any place like this. So she changes my pants around, fixes me up and all that, fixes up my sister a little bit, fixes herself up a little bit, and we start walking very calm and not running or anything, and we're trying to walk away from the ghetto and from the Gentile section of Izbica and away towards Wierkowice. We're walking via meadows, because I don't know if you noticed, when you were by the railroad station, if you look further out, you see meadows. Okay? I don't know if you noticed it or not. And perhaps now they don't have the meadows anymore, And we're walking a little bit, and in front of us are 4 women coming to Izbica. And they make a path in front of us. They tell us, hold it. you're Jews, and you cannot be running away from the ghetto. They're finally liquidating you. We finish you off. This is it. Yeah, we have to bring you back in. So my mother pulls another one of those. Imi Ojca I Syna I Ducha Świętego, Amen. She goes down and she starts praying. And this lady say, "You're a Christian?" And my mother says, "What else do you think?" And not only this, the priest is going to know about this. They were so astonished by this, they go down to and start praying also. And they ask my mother, "Don't tell the priest that we said this. And let's just forget this whole incident. It looks like you have no food. Why don't we give you some food that we have, and you can have some, and then let's just forget this ever happened." So my mother says, "Yeah, all right, I'll do that. Let's just forget this ever happened." So they give us some bread and some eggs, and my mother crosses herself again, and they cross themselves again, you know. It was an amazing, amazing thing. It was stunning, okay? And we just walk towards where we're supposed to walk, and these ladies walking that way. So twice we beat the situation by my mother using her head of making believe that we are Christians and convincing the people that we are Christians. We walking straight up, perhaps 2 kilometers, and we figure we almost have it made already because nobody knows us any further, and we don't look real Jewish per se, and we're staying away and going with meadows, so we feel pretty safe at this point. And who do you think comes along? Out of nowhere comes Chaimcha. And he says, "What do you know about my family?" I say, "I'm sorry to tell you, but your sisters, your 2 sisters and your nephew and niece were killed." And he starts crying, and that was his only family left over, so he's just left by himself. He says, "Can I walk with you?" I see Chaimcha, I tell him, "I sure want you to walk with me." And meanwhile, I see he's got something bulging in his pocket. "What do you got in your pocket?" He says, "I got a big knife." "Well, let me see it," I tell him. He takes out a big knife, maybe that big, like 2 inches, 3 inches, you know. And I say to myself, "Good God, now I have somebody to protect me." I'll feel much better, him walking with us. I say, "Well, come on, Chaimcha, you come with us." And we're walking another couple of kilometers, and before my eyes come 4 kids. These 4 kids were in ages, in my estimation, I turned 10 already at that point. In my estimation, they looked like perhaps 17 to 14, 4 of them. Aggressive ones, you know. They right away, they grab my mother, and they say, "You're a Jew, you're not going anywhere, so we're going to take you back, or we want your money." And Harry pulls out the knife, and they tell Harry, "We don't want you, you can go. We only want the woman and the 2 children." So Harry starts turning to walk. I tell Harry, "Don't you dare to walk. How could you leave me and my mother and my sister with these young guys?" And Harry says, "I can't help it. I got to go." So I say, "Well, then leave the knife with me." He says, "No, I'm going away." And before I look around, he's gone. So here I am with my mother and my sister and myself, and these 4 kids are holding us by the hand, you know. And they say, we want your money, or we take you back." So my mother starts negotiating with them. Meanwhile, I talk to my mother in Jewish, and I tell her in Jewish that this is not going to work that way, because look what happened before. Well, you gave the man the money, and he took us anyway. We got to do something else here. Now, I was very skinny kid, and I was pretty fast at that time. Of course, I didn't have that much to eat for a couple of years already, so I guess I was skinny from that. And so I said to my mother in Jewish, and I had money on me. I had some money. I had a belt with some money. My sister had a belt with some money in it. There was Polish money. And I think my mother had some money. Where we got this money from, I don't know. But I was given to hold it, and I held it. And I told my mother in Jewish that I'm going to do the talking to these kids. And we're not going to do it like before. So I tell them that you want money, we'll give you money. But I tell them you have to let my mom and my sister go up to where we were in a valley. Up was a mountain, a little mountain like. And I told them when my mother and my sister reaches that mountain, I'll give you the money and you let me go. And they were kind of talking amongst one another. Perhaps they were figuring this little kid, we could take him anyway, whatever. They say, how do you know we have the money? I say, I have the money over here. And he was trying to grab it, I bit him. And he wanted to hit me. I tell you, if you hit me, I'm going to run away right now and nobody else has money. And they said, okay, we'll let your mother and your sister go and we'll hold on to you. It's okay. So Mom and Rose went up, and as soon as I saw him up the hill, I unhooked my belt, and I'm trying to go. He's holding my hand. I bit him very hard, and he let go. And I took off like a rabbit, joined my mother and my sister. They did not run after us, being happy, dividing the spoil I just gave them. And we started walking fast, still going towards Verkhovica. We walk in a couple of kilometers, and it's afternoon already at this point. The sun is very hot. And once again, I kind of get very tired. I feel like I'm going to drop. And suddenly, in front of us, what comes along? A horse and a wagon. And one man sitting in it, and he says, and my mother makes, the cross, And he crosses back. He says, are you the survivors of the Vyshedlenie, the Polish people that were chased out of this village? And my mother says, exactly. We're coming from this Polish village. Would you give us a lift to Verkhovica? And he says, oh yeah, get in. And we get into this wagon, and he has some food. In Poland, everybody has some food as they go along. He gave us some bread and something, we all ate. And somehow, the next thing I remember, it was already late in the afternoon. The next thing I remember is waking up before, not in the woods themselves, but right at the entrance to the woods to Verkhovica. I wake up, and in front of me I see my father. It's like a dream. Now, how did I get there? I asked my mother, and my mother and my sister said, we had to carry you off the wagon to the woods, which wasn't that far from because that guy gave us a lift, obviously, to pretty close to the woods in Verkhovica until we caught up to where we were together. So suddenly here what I see in front of me. My father, and he's got a gun. Your father, he's got a rifle. Uncle Nathan, he's got a rifle. Yosale from Canada, he's got a rifle that's taller than him.
Did they tell you where they had been?
No, wait a minute, I'm just starting this, I was so impressed with his was a World War I rifle, taller than him, I particularly paid attention to weapons at that point, And another guy who I didn't know, and Duvit, who was the husband of Paula, Mima Branch's son-in-law, and she died, and her son, her little boy, died also. And he had a beautiful rifle, sort of shotgun, very shiny. I remember it so distinctly, with all the bullets on him, whereas like your father and my father, I didn't see no bullets hanging around on him, but he had all the bullets hanging on him, and on top of it he had anywhere from 6 to 8 hand grenades hanging. I was so impressed with that, because what I gone through that day. So before anything else, I tell him, Dufche, we talking Jewish, give me one hand grenade. And he says, wait a minute, what are you saying? You're a small boy, you can't have hand grenades. And I tell him, do you know what happened to me all day today? I have to have something, and a hand grenade is just for me. You don't even know how to use this. I know I don't know how to use it, so show me how to use it. So, and my mother stands right around there, and he says, Layed, do you want Shlomo to have a hand grenade? And my mother says, yes, give him a hand grenade and show him how to use it. Sure enough, he gives me a hand grenade, shows me how to pull the pin, and what to do with it, and so forth, and how to handle it. And he gives it to me, and of course, I survived with that hand grenade. I had it on me for the rest of my hiding until I was liberated. I had the hand grenade. And I was very happy to have that hand grenade. It gave me courage, it gave me strength, and I wasn't afraid with the hand grenade. Now, going back to asking, where was your father after that? And your father and Yosele and Nathan and Esther. Esther was there too. And Moshe, they had gone out. They told me they had suspected for the last 3-4 weeks that something was going to happen, because somehow they got wind that they were liquidating ghettos. And there was only a question of time before they were going to liquidate the Izbitza ghetto too. So what they did is, they used to get out at night, and then if it wasn't liquidated, they'd come back in the morning, bring some food for us and for, for some people too. And so that's why they didn't get caught when the Germans came. And instead of seeing that, them and my father and the rest of the family that survived, they just took off for Verkhovica. Somehow, without even me knowing it, they prepared some guns in Verkhovica. That's why they made up to meet in that village of Verkhovica, because they accumulated, they bought some weapons, and they hid it in Verkhovica, just for whenever they would be having this occasion, and we would go into hiding finally this time, whereas in the opposite of 1942, where nobody had a weapon, this time we would have weapons and try to survive with weapons, okay? So that answers your question as to how it happened, so that they weren't inside the ghetto while we were inside the ghetto. So this day is, I can say it was the longest day of my life in terms of what I had to go through, and it just as well was for my sister and for my mother. And I'll never forget the heroic things that my mother accomplished that day to try to save us, because if it wasn't for her using her head, we would have been dead just like everybody else. It was just a true hero performance on the part of my mother, and that we were able to survive that day. Now, your mother had either left the ghetto before the liquidation, or used the same method of not sleeping over at night in the ghetto. Or perhaps she had left weeks before then, I do not know. Okay? Because on the day of liquidation, she was not in the ghetto neither. So, here we are in the woods, and it's time to find a hiding place. And the first hiding place we got was in Vierkovica. One of the members in our family knew someone of the Gentile people there, and with some money, they allowed us to use the barn, the roof of the barn, you know. They had hay in there, and you could stay. And they would drop off a little food during the day. When they fed the pigs, they would give us some food. The quality of the food was not material as long as it was something, so it doesn't matter. I'm not going to go and describe whether it was so bad and this and that, because it was not even a question how bad it was. It was just a question of having something and being protected so that no one would see you and try to survive. However, we were armed. And we stayed in that place, to the best of my recollection, a couple of weeks. And we were going between, during the day, staying, there was small woods right near the farm. During the day we stayed in the small woods. At night we would go up to sleep in the barn. And as we stayed there, our next problem weren't the Germans as much as the Polish partisans. They called themselves partisans, but what in effect they were bandits, and they were there to hunt for Jews. They were killing Jews, armed Polish men. They called themselves AK. AK means Armia Krajova, or the army of the people. But really, all they were anti-Semites, and out to try to catch whatever Jews survived from this liquidation of the ghettos, or any other Jews that were hiding. They surrounded us, the whole barn, but the way we operated, one person was a lookout and noticed that they were doing this, and everybody else woke up. And before I know it, like my father would got disappeared, I don't know where he left, and everybody else stuck their weapons out all the way around, and Dufce, who was the leader for us, and he was a very capable young man, and he told these Polish men around there that if they told us to surround our weapons, and they wouldn't hurt us. But of course we knew if we surrendered the weapons, they were going to shoot us, kill us. So he told them that if they don't leave right away, we were going to start firing, and whatever happens, happens. And after a few minutes confrontation, they left. So we survived this particular thing. We survived that. We moved out of that particular little area, but still in Vierkovica, and moved to the next area, which was like maybe only 8 houses down. It was a little wood on the side. And there, Aunt Esther was there, Uncle Nathan was there, your father, Uncle Moshe, my father, Yosale, just about everybody that survived, except for my sister. At this point, my mother found my sister a place with a lady that my sister would take care of her children, and she would keep her. And not as, she would be like, not a nanny, but not as a Jewish person, a non-Jewish person. However, everybody knew around her that she was Jewish. And they called her not Rose, but Wanda. And those that knew her, she got a lot of beatings from the people there, sometimes very bad ones.
Why did your mom feel she would be better off there than within your group?
Because they tried to disperse a few people as much as they could, so if we caught at once and we get killed, at least she would survive. So my mom felt that it was much safer for her there. Of course, today, my sister doesn't feel that way. She feels that perhaps my mother didn't act the right way for her. But
Is this something that happened late? In other words, is this something that's coming out from your sister now?
right
Or it's
now,
always been?
now, not before it was okay. Now my sister thinks so. At any rate, while we were, this was a period of like 3-4 weeks right after the liquidation of the ghetto, we were in this area. And somehow, some Polish partisans infiltrated our hiding place and divided us in 2 groups. Somehow, when your father and Uncle Moshe and my father and Yossele saw that there were 3 or 4 Polish, these partisans, came into the house, and we had the use of the house and the woods. They saw that, they separated themselves from us because they felt that a firefight they couldn't win. So they stayed on the outside, and we stayed on the inside of the house. And we went up the roof of the house. These partisans were drinking. And it was getting dark, and they were getting very, they were not very drunk, but they were getting very rowdy. And they were starting to physically assault my mother, just kind of a little bit, And we went to the upstairs. It was getting dark, and it was only Uncle Nathan and Esther. Uncle Nathan had the rifle with him, and of course I had the hand grenade, and my mother, and we went up on that roof, and my mother was frightened. Then this so-called partisan came up, and he was a little drunk, and he started kind of getting closer to my mother. All right? Yeah. Nobody knows about it. This particular aspect, what I'm going to tell you, it's only I know. Not even my sister knew about this. I told my sister about this maybe 2-3 years ago, because I had never told anybody about that. Because I feel perhaps that I didn't act strong enough to protect my mother. I was a choice of pulling the pin on the grenade to kill us all. And because he ordered me to go to the corner and cover myself with hay. At the same time, he put his rifle right near me. He stood it up. I guess if I had any guts, I could have probably grabbed the rifle and killed him. But I just didn't have the guts. And he assaulted my mother. I never could forgive myself for that.
What about the other people in the room with rifles?
What?
With rifles?
Nathan and Esther.
Well, they were kind of getting into things so not to upset him, and they just, faded into it, For me, that was the most tormenting thing that I ever lived with. My mother subsequently somehow got herself to a hospital, and she survived the hospital, and she came back. But me, I really felt bad for myself. But I guess I didn't do things. I didn't do things. I thought I should have. And so we got out of that. I got out of that place. But we didn't get out of Verkhovice. It was we still our time scheme here is May, June 1943. And we're still staying in Verkhovice. And my mother, after staying in the hospital, she came back. And she was able to kind of get through this by playing Christian lady. We stayed in Verkhovice, right near the woods. Maybe a month and a half, by one man there. We had the use of the barn, the roof of the barn. And all I could do is just watch the birds flying around and take an inventory who was with me. My mother, my father, your father, Uncle Moishe, Yosele, and Dufche. The same people that I met after surviving the ghetto. Escape from the ghetto. You know, the same people. We stayed together all this period of time, like almost 3 months period. And now we are into almost the end of August of 1943. And suddenly there's an increase of liquidation of Gentile people out of Polish villages. And we hear Polish people running and saying the Germans are coming to liquidate Verkhovice. And now, funny thing, how do you get out with weapons? You know, as they were advantaged when we had them, suddenly they become a disadvantage, because if you have to carry them in the open and everybody looks, you got a little problem. And so they improvised. They took some straw, made a big bundle of straw, put 4 weapons into the straw, tied it up and gave it to me to carry on my shoulder. And I carried it about 300 yards into the woods. We all went into the woods together with the other Polish people. Suddenly nobody asked you, are you Jewish, are you not Jewish, or whatever, because everybody was afraid for the Germans. And we hung around in the woods just enough for the evening to fall. The evening fell. Everybody took their weapons out, and they decided we cannot stay in Verkhovice anymore, because there were too many Germans were coming around that way and so forth. So at that point we subdivided. I went with my father in Yosele, and my mother went, I don't know where. Your father, I don't know where he went.
Was he with your mother? You don't know.
I don't know. Esther and Uncle and Uncle Nathan went someplace also, which I didn't know where they went. And David stayed in the area of Verkhovice.
My mother wasn't with this group.
No, your mother was not with that group. And now we are now reaching into September of 43 and onwards. And the 3 of us, my father, me, and Yosele, are operating. Our weapons consisted of, I had the hand grenade. I also made myself a rifle from wood. My father made a rifle that looked like a rifle, but it was wood, you know. And I carried it all the time on the shoulder. So in the evening, when the 3 of us were walking, it looked like all 3 of us were armed. if you were armed, the Polish people wouldn't do anything to you. Absolutely nothing. And my father had that gun too. He only had 2 bullets in it, that's all. Now, in between, while this is going on now, somewhere around September of 1943, we lose Josele somehow. I don't know where he went. And suddenly we reconnect with, in between, I saw my mother coming. She was kind of walking from here to there to here, at night, checking things, you know. And suddenly we wind up with your mom, your father. I do believe their name was Taubman, you know, the man and the woman. They will live in Israel now. Or maybe it's an incorrect name. I really don't remember their names. And my father. And now we are in the village of Plinke, also in the barn. And there we're staying on the roof, and at night my father, your father, and this other man go out and procure food by force, or if possible for money. Money was running low anyway. And some clothes. I had no clothes almost. Everything was torn. I didn't have a pair of shoes. And there was brought some clothes. They procured some clothes as well. Your mother sewed it up for me and really took care of me. That's a part of the time where we hid together with your mother, and where she really cared for me and took care of me. Probably lasted maybe 4 to 6 weeks, that period of time. And it was a pretty nice time in terms of safety, where I wasn't afraid for getting discovered or anything like that, because the safety of the roof, and I always felt safe whenever people that were with me had rifles. So I felt good about that. And that lasted about 4 to 6 weeks, like I said. And that's the last time I had seen your mother until the liberation in 1944, which was like about 9 months later. I had seen your father one more time, and then I didn't see your father neither. Or Uncle Moshe, or Uncle Nathan, until the next time. Well, I'll have to get to that point where I saw them, but there was a stretch there for maybe 3 months that I didn't see him, because we had to leave that roof where we were with your mother and with your dad. Me and Dad had to leave, and your dad went someplace, and I don't know where your mother went. I also don't know where this other couple went. But I and my father, we hooked up with my mother and my sister.
She left the place?
She left the place. And we hooked up by a family. Now we're walking into October of 1943, and it's getting cold. And snow is starting to fall in Poland at that time, and I have no shoes. And we found a place to hide by a family by the name of Puro. Very wonderful people, wonderful Gentile.
What's her name?
Puro.
Puro?
Yeah. Very wonderful Gentile people, very religious. And I do believe that they hid us for the sake of, because they believed in it, not because they would get a few zlotys, you know. And after whatever negotiations my parents did was that Mr. Puro, first we were in the barn, maybe 100 feet away from his house and his other barn where he kept the pigs and the cows. And in between, my sister came, my mother brought 2 pair of shoes. One were big army boots, maybe 12, 14 inches, and a pair of wooden shoes, smaller ones. So, and my mother got my sister another job with a lady where she would take care of children. I don't know if my sister liked that or she didn't like it, but nonetheless, that's what happened. So before, like we were together maybe a week there, and before we left, now my sister said, "No, you keep the army boots, I want the wooden boots, it's funny." And I told my sister, "But I can't walk in these army boots, these are big, I mean real big." Well, finally she took the army boots and she gave me the wooden shoes. So I had these wooden shoes. I remember, a blue jacket, a closed-up jacket, kind of for the winter, and another pair of pants. Somehow, my mother dug it up, someplace she got it, and my sister got some clothes for the winter too, like a coat. And my sister left with my mother, and I and my father went into the barn to the roof. And now we are in November of 1943. The barn, the roof had hay, lots of hay. And what we did is he made a little hole to get inside, and then a little bigger hole, I'd say 3 feet by 2 feet, where my mother and my mother and my father could stay. And all you could do in that hall is lay, turn to the left or to the right, and sit up. You could not stand up. It wasn't tall enough to stand up. And we started our stay there in the winter of 1943. Now, somehow, after a while, I must have been, I don't know, today we would say upset or something, because I didn't have what to do. And somehow my mother got hold of a notebook, and my father gave me ABCs to write and Aleph Beis to write.